People say less is more. At Red Barn, we think less is better. It's what you won't find that sets our natural premium pet food apart. No byproducts, no corn or soy, no fillers. Just the natural ingredients your pets need to live the healthy life they deserve. Look at the label. We want you to. Red Barn Naturals Pet Food. Simply the best. Find it in your local pet specialty store. Try our grain-free rolled food. It's protein-packed with less risk of food sensitivity.
Who are the unstoppable ones?
Is it just that they can do it and I can't?
Who are the unstoppable ones?
Is it just that they can do it and I can't?
Who are the unstoppable ones?
Is it just that they can do it and I can't? Mission Unstoppable. Mission Unstoppable.
The unstoppable ones.
You did say unstoppable, right? You did say unstoppable, right? What is it they know that I don't? Coach Frankie Picasso takes you on Mission Unstoppable.
Who are the unstoppable ones?
Can anyone stop these people?
Who
Good evening.
are the unstoppable ones?
He wants to go again. He can't wait to go again. He's so enthusiastic. He's so unstoppable. Well, good evening and welcome to Mission Unstoppable Radio. I am your host, the unstoppable Frankie Picasso, and tonight I must say that I am very pleased to be able to offer this show and interview to you. I should maybe warn you that it will be emotional. It may stretch your boundaries and beliefs, and I ask that you use your intuition and your higher guidance to sit with this information and then believe what is true for you. Before I introduce my guest, however, I do want to mention that I am involved in a new project, something I am very proud of. It's called the Predator Project. The Predator Project is committed to slamming the doors on Internet predators, and our tools are going to be education through seminars, hands-on training, active campaigning for legislation and lobbying for regulation, and unmasking the predators to reveal their intent to defraud. Internet predators are not the monsters that we as children believe to be hiding under our beds. They are so much worse because they're cold-hearted executioners, men and women, whose existence depends on targeting unsuspecting, defenseless victims, regardless of age and gender. So these are folks who, with great hope, search the Internet with optimism for trying to find true love and companionship. They're looking for their soulmates. And we are going to stop these people from defrauding, these Internet predators from defrauding these people, breaking their hearts and breaking their bank accounts. So it's just something to look forward to in the future, and look for that. Okay, back to the show. Our guide this evening is a woman, a mother, who will take us into a time and space, a world no parent wants to go, a place where our worst nightmares are realized, a place where a beloved child dies before his or her parent, a child whose life is cut short from an insidious disease, a most auspicious disease, a child whose fate was revealed to his mother when she herself was just a child. So stay tuned, stay close, and all will be revealed shortly on Mission Unstoppable Radio. Time in Toronto is 8 p.m., 7 in Chicago, and 6 in Los Angeles. If you have joined us on Tuesday, October the 5th, then you are listening to the live version of the show, and we encourage you to call in and join us on air. You can call 646-595-3741. Hit the 1 key to get into the host key so I know that you're there. Also, I do have the chat room open, so feel free to join us there. If you're listening to the show in archive or on TogiNet Radio on Thursday, feel free to contact me if you want any more information at frankie@missionunstoppable.com. Shirley Enebrad is an award-winning television producer, writer, and author. Her book is called Over the Rainbow Bridge. It's the memoir she wrote for her only son, Cory, who passed away at the age of 9 from leukemia. She's a mother, a wife, a mother of 2 daughters, a grandmother to another Cory. She has been a tireless advocate for children with cancer, and she became a certified grief counselor, and she's been working with grieving children and adults for 25 years now. For her countless hours of volunteer work, she's been honored with a Jefferson Award for Community Service, Angel of Hospice Award, and she's currently the president of Candlelighters Childhood Cancer Foundation of Western Washington. So please welcome Shirley to Mission Unstoppable, and thank you so much, Shirley, for sharing your story and Cory's story with us this evening.
Thanks, Frankie. I'm honored to be here.
I am really just so thrilled that you are. Shirley, You made a promise to Cory that you would never forget him. Kind of a funny, I guess kids, they can't imagine that a parent would ever forget their child. But that promise and the legacy became his book, Over the Rainbow Bridge, which folks can find on your website, www.overtherainbowbridge.info. However, this book took you a lot longer to write than you thought it would.
It took me, it took me a long time to start it, but it only took about 6 months to write it. And then it sat for about 11 years because the ending hadn't happened yet. I was waiting for the ending.
Okay, so Cory was born March 18th. What year?
1976.
Okay, March 18th is my dad's birthday, too.
Oh, really? It's a good day.
Yeah, it's a good day. And then he passed away on May 13th. What year?
Mother's Day, 85.
Mother's Day, 85. Great Mother's Day. So it sat for 11 years, as you said, because you were waiting for the ending, and the ending, I guess, has happened, and we're going to wait a little while for you to talk about that ending. But I do want to go back to your childhood when you were 10 years old, and you had a premonition that you would have a child who was going to be ill. How did that come about? Was it recognized to you? Or?
Well, we were driving, I was with my family, and we were driving in California along Half Moon Bay, and it's an area that has a lot of land fog. And I looked out the window and I saw this fog swirling around, and so I composed a poem about, and I sort of imagined what it would be like to be in a grave with the fog rolling around above you. And anyway, I wrote this really morbid poem, and my mom found it and totally freaked out and asked me, where that came from. And I said, I don't know, but when I grow up, I'm going to have an ill child that will eventually die, and together we will teach people not to be afraid of death. So my mom's looking at this 10-year-old, and she's like, what? So, but luckily my mom, was pretty calm, pretty cool and collected, and she sort of filed it away. And then years later, when my son had some problems with his blood workup on his second birthday, we both kind of thought that was it. But it actually didn't manifest itself for another year and a half.
You were very close to your grandfather.
I was very close.
And your grandfather was a Hawaiian cowboy, which is kind of exciting. And he also had a deep belief in the spirit world. But he was a Christian minister. He became a Christian minister. So you were brought up with a wide variety of beliefs.
Very much mixed and very spiritual and also very religious at the same time. So it's a really funny combination because some people are, or most people are one or the other, but not both. And so I've always appreciated that he was so open-minded considering he was a Methodist minister. But, he grew up in Hawaii. You have to be, I don't know if you've ever been there, but you can feel things there that you don't feel in other places and see things. And so, he always told me, things happen that you can't explain. It doesn't mean that they're not happening or that you're crazy. He said there's a lot of mysteries out there, and, you have to sort of follow your gut and know what you know. But then he also read the Bible twice a day. So it was an interesting upbringing.
You were, have you always felt sensitive to the energies?
I was born 3.5 months premature. And this was back in the day when most babies wouldn't survive that. Mm-hmm. And I think that part of my sensitivity has always related back to being a survivor in that, because I was born in a county hospital in the early 50s. And, that was just unheard of. Plus, it was back when they didn't have the knowledge about bonding and stuff. So they wouldn't even let my mom come in and hold me. And,
wow.
Yeah, so it's just kind of odd, but I've always sort of had this very fierce, independent spirit and a very strong belief in God and the spirits. And I think it's because I lived sort of in both worlds because I came early and I was on, I weighed less than 2 pounds.
Yeah, but your grandfather saw his father, the spirit ghost of his father. And do you think that did your mom ever see ghosts? Did she ever mention that to you?
She never talked about it, but she grew up in a boarding school in San Francisco for part of her life when she was younger because her parents split up. And I think there was a lot of things there. But my mom was really very passive and very quiet. And obviously I took after my dad. But she always, she believed her dad when he said, stuff happens. And when I first bought a house that had a ghost in it, it didn't even faze her when I told her that I could feel that I wasn't there alone. So I know that she'd had experiences. She just didn't talk about them that much. But it was understood in our family that stuff happens. And, she completely believed that her father had seen his father out in that cane field. So.
Yeah, I just wondered if it runs in families or not. It's kind of interesting to think about.
I think it's more that you're more open-minded if you've been allowed to believe that. Yeah, and I think it happens around everybody, but if you're not open to it, you don't recognize it, or you think that you're seeing something out of the corner of your eye and you don't really pay much attention to it.
Right. Yeah.
So I've always paid attention.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You have a daughter. You had two daughters now, but at the time you had Cory had a little sister, Bri.
Yes, he did. And she's 3 years younger than he would have been.
And I thought it was so interesting through the book that eventually at the end, because I know for myself I have a stepsister who had an older sister who was always ill, and she was the one who was always kind of being passed over because the other one needed so much attention. And how did that manifest for your daughter? Did she suffer for it, do you think?
Oh, yeah. She's still, I think now she's 31 and she's finally starting to come into her own. I started the support groups back when they were little because of her, not because of him. He actually knew what was going on because he was extremely bright. But he was intuitive, and he's the one that went to the hospital every other day or every day, depending on where he was at in his treatment. So he couldn't deny that there was something going on. But for her, people, we would run into somebody at the mall or at the grocery store, and the first thing they'd ask me was, "How's Cory?" And she'd be standing there like chopped liver, And I remember when she was about 3, she said, "I'm here. I'm okay. I'm cute." And she just couldn't wrap her head around it. Well, intellectually she knows that I didn't spend more time with him because I chose to spend more time with him.
Right.
But it still leaves deep scars. And even with kids whose siblings survive, there is still a lot of that resentment and deep-seated anger at the parent who did the most of the caregiving. So she didn't have, a lot of them end up with eating disorders and, cutting and stuff like that because they don't know how to let go of their pain, and they don't know how to talk about it because they don't trust their parent because their parent ignored them. And so it's a real common thing that I've discovered amongst siblings whose kid, in this case he was the older brother, but even if they're the younger sibling, it's still really hard because they do get ignored, and it's not intentional. It's just a unfortunate side effect of what's going on in the family's life.
It is unfortunate, and you see, not to the same degree. Well, it's different because they're older, but caregivers often are also ignored. Mm-hmm. And how is the patient? But what about you? Like, you're running yourself ragged as the mother. Your child, your child's very ill. He's probably going to die, and you still have to maintain this household and do all these normal things. And how are you, Shirley?
Yeah, well,
really, it's the caregivers they're forgotten too.
That's an interesting subject because 80 to 85% of marriages do not survive a chronic illness diagnosis, not just cancer, but even if it's a heart problem or whatever. And so 9 times out of 10, it's the mom that gets left to caretake for the sick child and the other children. And so you just sort of go moment to moment and live in the moment because you can't think ahead. You can't think ahead, and it's not a conscious choice, but you just have to keep moving.
Well, yours didn't survive.
No,
yours didn't survive, and
it was pretty quick too.
Yeah, was it on its way out anyway?
No, but I always knew that I was the stronger partner and that it wasn't an equal partnership. And so as soon as they said, most marriages don't survive this, even good marriages crack. And I said, well, as you can see, I'm here by myself getting this diagnosis. So I knew that we were going to be a statistic fairly quickly because the amount of pressure that you go through, just going to and from treatments constantly, you don't have time. You don't have time to think about caretaking an adult. So he was like, finally, when I got him out of there, he was like I'd gotten rid of triplets. Happiest day of my life.
Yeah, I know. Oh, wow. Cory said to you that his purpose was to help you understand the path that you were going to be on, and that was the reason that he was sick and why he was...
Chose me. Yeah. Yeah, he said, I picked you to be my mom because I was supposed to help put you on your path. And I said, oh, great. How big is this path? And he said, well, you're supposed to help Elizabeth teach people not to be afraid of death. I said, oh, great, honey. Can you give me a bigger assignment? And plus, is this going to be a lifetime thing, or can I retire from this? So, we had become friends with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the doctor that wrote On Death and Dying and 16 other books about the subject, and that was her whole mission, was trying to help people grieve their wounds so that they could live fully and then die healthfully, And so it was an interesting assignment that he gave me, and part of that was starting the support groups and doing grief work and helping Elizabeth with her workshops all over the world, and then writing the book. I feel like the writing of the book was the last piece of the promise.
It's amazing 9 years and more, really, that you've gone through. Because the after work that you've been doing and are doing, continuing to do, is phenomenal. It was interesting. I thought we're going to go back through your story, but near the end, I think after Cory had passed away, you made friends with several families of children who also had cancer and who were probably going to pass on. And your daughter asked you to stop doing that because she needed to have some friends who weren't going to die.
Yeah, isn't that sad?
Yeah.
She got over that eventually, and luckily we moved to the East Coast right then, and so I had a break for a couple of years from cancer and dying children. But then after we got back, I was asked to start a bereavement support group for parents whose children had passed. So she wasn't involved with that, and the kids had already passed over. So I felt like that was a little safer for her. But my kids have done the Relay for Life ever since they could walk, and my youngest daughter goes to school in Hawaii and volunteers at the Ronald McDonald House, and this is her third year there. And then when she was in Brisbane for a summer, she volunteered at the Ronnie House there, and she started some teen groups here at the Seattle House. So my kids have not been allowed to not do community service.
That's incredible. Good for them.
Yeah.
Here in the schools, it's mandatory. At least 40 hours of it, but it's certainly not enough community service at all. Let's go back to this baby that you had who was so far advanced at every stage of the game. It's incredible. You read this, you go, oh my gosh, look at him. He's walking, talking, and doing things at 5 months, 6 months, 9 months that are absolutely incredible.
He was pretty. He started crawling at 3 months.
Wow.
No baby does that. Usually they're just little blobs, Yeah, he was definitely in fast forward and in every, especially physical abilities. But you could tell that his little wheels were turning all the time. The first time I found that he had pulled himself across the blanket on the living room floor, I could see the little wheels turning, And then the third time I moved him, instead of scooting across the blanket, he pulled the blanket so he could reach the toy without having to crawl across the blanket. And I was going, this can't be happening. You're 3 months old. So, yeah, he was pretty amazing. And he started swimming lessons when he was 4 months old. and he could swim the width of an Olympic pool with one breath.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and the instructor had to try to pull his head up, and he would fight her to try to stay underwater because he thought he was a guppy.
Oh.
Yeah.
That is so sweet. And so he was this normal kid until he hit about 3, and then you saw this abnormal blood work come back, and he said, it's nothing.
Yeah, he had the weird blood work at 2, and then at
2?
3.5 is when he started acting. Well, it looked like the flu, which is really typical of a lot of cancers, especially with kids. It just looked like, oh gosh, he's got the flu, and he was complaining about his legs aching, and I thought it was the muscles. I didn't realize it was bone pain, and he was so sick on Christmas morning that he couldn't open his presents, and I said, it's because he'd been kind of up and down for a week, and then I got the flu on Christmas Eve, so I thought, okay, it's the flu. And then he would be fine one day, and the next day he would be down, and I decided no matter what he was like the next day, he was going in, and that's when they took one look at him and couldn't believe how anemic he was. So, is my dog bothering you?
No, I was just thinking, hi, doggy. That's great. I love it. As the disease progressed, and he went into remission a couple times, right? 3 times?
Well, 4 times, yeah.
4 times?
Mm-hmm.
He loved playing. He loved school. He loved doing all the normal things, playing soccer, all the normal things that little boys like to do. But he also knew things. He knew things. Things like, he knew he was going to die, I guess, and he knew that what did he know? He told you that people come back in different packages. He told you that we choose to learn all our lessons, that we come here to learn our lessons, and that everybody has a mission and a purpose for being here.
Yep. He started going out of body at about 1.5 years before he died. But he was very, like you said, he was very intuitive about things. And he, when he started going out of body, he was not near death. He had just relapsed for the 3rd time. But he was not by any means near death, and he was, just being reinducted on chemotherapy. So it wasn't horrible. I mean, it wasn't fantastic, but it wasn't anything that would have stressed him to the point where, he would have imagined these things, which is what he's been accused of a few times. But he came back. I mean, he talked to people like my grandfather, people that had died long before he was born. And, he acknowledged that. He says, your grandpa's going to take care of me, even though he was, not here when I was born. And he still watches over you and Grandma and, my uncles. And then he came back. He started going at will, and he was coming back with messages for people that he didn't even know.
Wow.
People that not only did he not know the person that was sending the message, he didn't know the recipient. But he was telling me, Mom, you got to tell Frank that Rose told me that she's okay. And then he saw some of the kids that had predeceased him from our hospital and came back, and he says, you need to tell their mommies that they're okay. And then one little boy the whole time we knew this little boy, he was bald, and he said, oh, my gosh, Mom, and Chrisser has a full head of hair. I didn't even recognize him. So, and then I had a boyfriend from junior high and high school that had broken his neck in a diving accident. And my son knew that there was such a person, but he didn't know that he was in a wheelchair before he died, or that if you break your neck, that means your legs don't work. And he came back and he said, Michael wants you to tell his dad that he shouldn't feel guilty anymore, that he can dance and run and, he's happy. And I went, oh, gosh. So some of the times he would give me these messages to relay to people, and I'd be going, oh, no, I don't know how well.
Should I or shouldn't I?
You don't know how people receive that stuff,
Yeah.
So some of the messages, especially for parents, I gave to the social worker at the hospital and let her relay it. And several of them came to Cory's funeral and came up and thanked me, which was very sweet. But he was an amazing kid, and another really amazing thing was he counseled 5 suicidal teenagers at his school.
Tell that story. That's a great story.
Well, there was one boy.
Well, first of all, he went to a. Was it a private school or?
It was an alternative school.
An alternative school. Yeah.
Yeah, it was called a Freedom School, and he rode the bus with a boy that had, I think, 5 younger half siblings, and the boy was, early teens, 13 or something, and he was very sweet, and he got picked on constantly. And he felt bad because his mom had remarried and, they had together a bunch of kids. So he always felt like he didn't fit. And when Cory was near death, my daughter came home and said that this boy had talked about killing himself on the bus. And so we called the principal and said, "Are you aware that this is going on?" And she said, "No." And she said, "I need to look into this." So my son said, "Let me talk to her." So he got on the phone, and Cory told her, he said, "I want you to call him to your office, and I'm going to come up there and talk to him." And she said, "Okay." So she made the arrangements. We'd go up there the next day, and my cute little 8-year-old son, who is swollen beyond recognition, says, "Buddy, I would give anything if I could live." He said, "You could get help." He said, "I know you're not happy, but you have a healthy body." And he said, "You can't take your life because that's God's greatest gift to us, and it would be like spitting in God's face." He said, "If you need help, talk to my mom or my doctor," because Cory had a stress management doctor. He said, or talk to Beverly, the principal. He said, but don't even think about taking your life when you've got a healthy body. And he said, "Look at me." He said, "I would just give anything to have a healthy body." Well, so that kid's mom got called to the school that day, and she took him to a therapist, and the therapist talked to him, and he said, "This kid doesn't even need therapy." That little boy turned him around. So, he went a few more times, but his whole life shifted from one little conversation with my little sick boy. Well, then the word got out, and a bunch of other kids wanted to talk to him. And one girl who didn't even go to their school anymore took 5 buses to get to the school to talk to him.
Wow.
Yeah. And
That's incredible.
Yeah. She was a foster kid that had been abused in every foster home she'd been placed in. And she was just ready to give up. She didn't trust adults anymore. She was not safe. And she took all these buses to see him. And I had my brother drive him up to the school because he wasn't going to school full time then. And he had the same conversation with her, and he said, "You need to trust Beverly. She can help you, or trust my mom or somebody." He said, "There are people that can help you get away from this nasty business and put you in a safe place. You can't give up, and you certainly can't take your life." And she's doing great. And, I ran into the first boy just a few years ago when I was in downtown Seattle, and he's like 6'6" now. He gave me a big bear hug and told me how his life has turned out so well and that he's so grateful that he knew my son.
Oh.
So he was a little counselor, and then
yeah, a teacher.
He was.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross told Cory that he was a teacher, not a student, in his lifetime, and it certainly seems that way. Tell us about that relationship. How did you get involved with her? How did you meet her?
Well, we treated at Sale Children's, and the social worker there went to a Kubler-Ross workshop. She came back, and she was all excited, and I said, I've always admired her, and I'd love to meet her. And she said, well, as luck would have it, she wants to come here and do a teaching video at the University of Washington, and she asked me to recruit 2 families. She said, "Do you want to be one of them?" I said, "Oh, yeah." So we went to do this video with her and just sat in the studio and talked to her. She asked Cory what it felt like to be a little boy with leukemia and, how was he facing the idea that he might die and stuff. And it was pretty incredible. So it was me and my mom and Bri and Cory. And then the other family was an intact couple with 3 children, and her child is probably doing fine, working on Wall Street or something now, because he had a much better prognosis than Cory. And at that point, by the time we met Elizabeth, Cory had already asked to stop treatment the first time. So I asked her what she thought, and she said, well, I think he knows. And she had asked all of us to draw a picture before we started the taping, and she looked at the pictures and analyzed the colors and what was in them and stuff. And Cory's drawing was a picture of E.T. walking towards a spaceship saying, "Home, home." And she said, "What do you think that means?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, well, that's pretty obvious." So she The two of them just clicked like crazy, though, you know. And it was really funny because they took my kids off the set and brought in the second family and asked my mom and I to stay. So after we were done taping, I couldn't find my son, and he was in the control booth helping the director.
Oh, that's funny.
I'm sure he was up there taking over, but he was quite the charmer and really extremely bright. But he and Elizabeth stayed connected, and I think they were psychically connected because whenever he needed help, she would miraculously call out of the blue. And one time he was having problems with his short-term memory, and he didn't tell me. I think he forgot. But he kept making excuses not to go to school. And finally I figured it out, and when he said that he had a hangnail and couldn't go to school, I said, what is going on here? So he finally admitted that he was embarrassed because he would be mid-sentence and forget what he was saying. So,
well, welcome to my world.
I know. I'm there now, too. Well, so then Elizabeth called that night, and I told her what was happening, and she said, put him on the phone. So he got on the phone, and that's when she said, you know, Cory, you did not come here to be a student this lifetime. You came here to teach, and you've already taught thousands of people through your drawing. She takes a drawing. He'd made her a drawing, too, of the Crystal Castle and Summerland, and she took it all over the world to her grief workshops and showed it to people. And she said, people that have not allowed themselves an emotion in 20, 30 years, look at that picture and start crying because they're so relieved to think that there is a heaven and that maybe, you know, because they've squandered their lives, that they can still be redeemed kind of thing. And he was just kind of going, oh, okay. So she said, you know, concentrate on what you can do and don't worry about the words.
Let's talk about that poster for a moment because it is on, if anybody would like to see it, if you're on the show page right now, you go to the blog under Mission Unstoppable and Shirley's show, and you just keep scrolling down, and I do have a picture of the Crystal Castle there. It's also on Shirley's website at www.overtheraiinbowbridge.info, and it's on the Unstoppable site, unstoppablefrankiepicasso.com. So you can go to any of those places and have a look at that castle right now as we're talking about it. Maybe we can talk about the images in there, Shirley. We have the Crystal Castle, and I think he said that there was like little, so I guess the turrets and the other little places where everybody lives.
Yeah, the other little cottages and smaller castles. He said that's where the peons like you and me.
Yeah, the peons live. And the sparks, is that us being energy?
It is.
What that is?
Sparks of energy, and then the things that look like asterisks and like little swirls, that's energy. Because he said that everything is made of light energy. And then right to the left,
atoms in there too.
Yeah, well that's us. And then right to the left, you can barely make it out, is a butterfly, and that is the transition of the symbol for the transition of from your earth body to your heavenly body.
As you go up that rainbow.
The Rainbow Bridge, that's how I came up with the title. He said that's one of the ways that you get to heaven. And he said that when you see a rainbow, it's actually the side view of the bridge from here to heaven, and somebody's crossing over. So, you know, he said, I know that other people get there by other means, but that was his main way of getting there. And that's where he saw my grandfather the first time he went, and our dog was waiting for him on the crest of the bridge.
Yeah. And when he went over the last time, though, he was asking about his dog. Do you think that things were different, or?
No, I think the dog was preoccupied. Really, the last thing I heard him say right before he stopped breathing was, "Where's Quaxer?" And I thought, oh no, you know, how come the dog's not on the bridge? But as he was saying it, his voice was getting farther away, like he was walking over it, and it was pretty incredible. My girlfriend heard it too. So.
Wow.
Yeah,
that is amazing. Yeah.
His death experience wasn't very fun. You know, I mean, it was pretty awful in some places, but it was also very miraculous. It was almost as miraculous as his birth. And people think I'm weird when I say that, but it was pretty incredible.
Because he said dying's easy, or you know, but or death is easy, dying is hard. And it seemed like, the way you described it, and I'm sure that it was, that nobody should have to go through that much pain and suffering.
No, and I could never figure out why. You know, because I always feel like that, you know, there's a reason for everything,
And he did his job just by dying. He did his job to come here and just live a short life. Why did he have to suffer more?
Yeah.
What was that? What does that do?
Yeah, I never have figured that one out. He didn't explain it either, But he also went right before, I think about a week before he died, I was trying to give him pain medication, and he made a joke in front of some friends of mine that kind of freaked everybody out. He started yelling, "Help, help, there's a crazy lady trying to poison me." Everybody stopped, and I went, "What?" And he goes, "Mom, just calm down. I'm just dying." And I said, "Right now?" And he said, "No." He said, it's okay. And I went, all right. So, and then the same thing that night before he passed, he was having a hard time, and the medication wasn't working, and he just said, "Mom, it's okay." And I went, okay. So, yeah.
Did he die? Didn't he pass over, kind of almost passed over, and he said, "No, I have to go back, leave me alone," kind of thing?
That was the night before he passed. The
night before he passed.
He called it dilly-dallying.
He needed to do.
Yeah. He wasn't ready to go. He said, you know what it was? He wanted to be with me for Mother's Day.
Oh.
So.
That's so great.
I know.
That is so great.
And then,
so sweet. Little boys, man.
The first thing he said when he came out of his methadone-induced coma was, "Did I miss Mother's Day?" And I'm going, what? I didn't even clue in why that was so significant for him, because I was so freaked out that he had started talking again. And I was so happy. And then he said, "I didn't miss Mother's Day, did I?" I said, "Honey, don't worry about it." It's like, please, don't worry. And later I realized that that's what he was holding on for.
Yeah. He called that crystal, that Crystal Palace in Summerland. And I guess it's significant that you lived in Oregon at the time and it rains a lot.
No,
does that have any bearing on it?
Well, that's what I thought, because, it does rain a lot here in the Northwest. And I just figured, okay, he's a Northwest kid, and, you kind of get sick of the long winters and stuff. But have you ever been to Lilydale, New York?
Yeah.
Or heard?
Yeah.
Well, I went there last summer, not this past summer, but 2009, to do some research, and I bought a book about Lilydale and brought it home, and I got to about page 70, I think, and the author is talking about heaven, and she says, or Summerland, as the spiritualists call it. And I almost dropped the book, because I thought Cory made that up. And
yeah.
And then I went, oh my gosh, Steve, Cory was a spiritualist, and I didn't even know it. But the description was so similar that it was kind of mind-blowing.
When he got out of body and went there a number of times, and then he said God got mad at him and told him not to come again. Why was that?
That was really scary. He was up in his room, and my friend Keller was over, my ex-boyfriend, and his friend, they'd come over to bring Bri her birthday present, and he started having chest pain, so he wanted to go lie down. And I took him up to his room, and then I went back up to check on him, and he was talking to somebody, and I walked in, and he's staring up next to the light fixture, which was not on, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "God's here." And I said, "He is?" And I looked up, and he said, "Oh, okay, I won't. I'm sorry." And I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Just a second, Mom." Well, then he told me that God had left, but that God had sort of scolded him about leaving his body and going to the other side, and that it was not his time. He was, he wasn't expected to be going for a while, and that he needed to stay in his body, and that it wasn't his choice to come and go as he pleased. So I said, "Well, gosh, how was that?" And he goes, "Well, hasn't God ever been mad at you?" And I went, "Well, not that I know of." And he said, "Well, he was kind of being stern." I said, "Was he yelling at you?" He goes, "No," but he says he was mad. And I went, "Oh, okay." So I said, "Did you tell him that you wanted to stay longer?" And he said, "Well, he told me it wasn't my time." And he told him that he wanted to get to be 9. And it was right around, it was right before his 8th birthday. And so he was very excited when he got to have an extra year.
Wow. Did he ever describe what God looked like?
He did. He told me, it's so funny because we were pretty unchurched. My grandfather's rolling over in his grave. But And when he got sick,
church doesn't, dogma doesn't mean, belief doesn't mean that you have to be in a building.
That's right, exactly. Well, he never went to church, especially after he got sick at 3, because I didn't want him around a lot of germs.
Yeah.
And he told me that God had very dark, piercing eyes. That's why he said he was scary. And that he was very tall, and that he was had dark hair, really dark hair, and that he looked Caucasian to him, which was funny. And because I thought maybe he'd see somebody that looked like me.
Yeah.
Or him. But no. And so and he said that he walked in God's garden, and that the robes that people wore in Summerland were iridescent because everything was reflective of the energy and the light, and that the colors and the flowers and the music and everything in Summerland was not of this earth. He said, Mom, I can't even describe it. It was so beautiful. And he asked God about his uncle who had committed suicide. My sister's ex-husband had committed suicide, and he was one of Cory's godparents. And Cory was pretty upset with him that he didn't, get help and that he wasted a perfectly good body. Although John was bipolar and went off his meds. So Cory understood that. He understood that there were meds and that he could have taken them and maybe continued to live. Plus he was mad at him because he committed suicide right before Christmas, which kind of ruined Christmas for my 2 nieces for the rest of their lives. And but Cory asked God, where his Uncle John was. And he told me that God told him that John had to go someplace special to think about what he'd done because he had spat in God's face. And I looked at Cory and I thought to myself, oh, my gosh, the Catholics have something. I mean, maybe there is a limbo or a purgatory. And then it was about 6 months later when Cory actually saw him there, and he came running downstairs and said, we got to get Auntie Rita on the phone and tell her he's there now and he's okay now. So apparently he had to, I don't know if it would be called paying penance, but he had to go think about what he'd done.
Have you ever talked to Dr. PMH Atwater? No. I've interviewed her about 3 times. She's written about 10 books on near-death experience. And she wrote the big book on near-death experience, too. And she herself has died 3 times and come back near-death. And, it's very interesting because she interviewed these people, children and adults, and there's 3 types of death experiences, the one with the light, and then there's another one, and then there's one that's not very nice. And it could be kids could have that one, or adults could have that one. And I think it might be 5% or 15% of the population has that one. But it was really kind of interesting but she thought it might have something to do with your beliefs or how you felt about yourself, although I find that kind of difficult with a child. So it's interesting, though.
I've heard that. Yeah, I think Elizabeth even thought that, too, that you kind of get what you expect. So, like, if you expect that you're going to hell, which I don't even believe in, but if you expect that, then you're going to get a negative experience. But if you expect, angels and horns, that you would get that kind of thing. But then you're right. It doesn't explain how an unchurched child like Cory has the same experience as somebody in, Lilydale or England or South America. And I just find it fascinating, because he was, let's see, when he first started going out of body, he was 7, and, had never been to church. So,
well, when he first went out of body, didn't he tell you he was on the beach in Maui?
Oh, well, that's sort of like astral projection. He was doing that when he was younger. He would come down in the morning and say, "Oh gosh, I'm so tired," and would go, "You just got up," and he'd go, "Oh, I know, but I was running on the beach all night in Hawaii."
But that astral projection, I mean, not everybody does that. So was that something that he taught himself to do, or he just knew how to do it? Is that why he was able to go to Summerland at will, or?
I don't know, because when he was doing the coming down in the morning and saying that he'd been to Hawaii, and then one night he said, "I think I'll go to Maui tonight." He, again, he wasn't near death, and we thought, well, that's a funny imagination. But then
did he ever say he met somebody there, like Grandpa or anybody?
No, It's like he just went to have fun. And so we said, my old housemate and I, Mary, said, well, we want to go. And he said, well, you have to find your own way there. So that's when we kind of looked at each other and went, astral projection, you know?
Yeah.
But the out-of-body stuff didn't happen until at least a year or so after that, after he'd been talking about going to Hawaii. And that really was in the blink of an eye. I mean, he fell asleep in the car for less than 3 minutes and woke up and said, you know, Mommy, I'm not afraid to die now because your grandpa's there and he's going to take care of me so I won't be alone. And I'm going, wait a minute, 3 minutes ago you said I want to live and I'm going to fight this. And then it was like a switch had happened when he fell asleep for that brief 3 minutes. And then he started telling me about all these people on the bridge and our dog wagging his tail, waiting for him and stuff. And I said, well, what happened? He said, well, I told him I wasn't ready. It wasn't time for me to come yet. He said, so I didn't go over the bridge. But my grandfather and our dog met him at the arc of the bridge, so he didn't go all the way across. And that's when my grandpa gave him the message that he watched over.
Did he say, I can't remember 100% in the book, did he say that when you first see everybody, they're they look like they want to look whatever age group they want to be in, like people, but after they're really just their energy, or they always look like a corporal form?
He said that everybody is like sparks of light, and that if they appear to you so that you're not used to it yet, like if they come to you have the visits in the middle of the night, a lot of people think they're dreams, but they're actually visits. He said they appear to you at the age that they choose to be. So he said, when I come back, I will be 7 because that's when I felt the healthiest.
Right.
And he told me that my foster sister's dad, Grandpa Nick, would be 26. He said, and Grandpa Nick wants to be 26. So he said,
I don't know what age I'd want to be.
But he said it takes a lot of energy to sort of manifest a body. And so that once people weren't too freaked out about it, then they wouldn't have to, like, do a whole body or something. And he appeared to Beverly, the woman that had been the principal of the school, over in Hawaii. She was meditating on a beach, and she was trying to decide if she was going to move over there because she was kind of sick of the weather in Seattle. And she heard his voice calling to her, and she turned around and she saw the sparks. She just saw like little light sparks of color behind her, but she could hear his voice. And she said, Cory, is that you? And he said, yeah. He said, I figured you wouldn't be freaked out. He said, just move already.
Oh, my gosh.
So she's been over there now for 30 years and very happy.
Oh. I want to talk briefly about the experience that parents have, dealing with a child, the hospital experience, the doctors and all of that. But I do want to get back to the butterfly story at the end. So let's try to do that. We don't have that much time. We got 12 minutes. Talk fast, Shirley. So what is it like for parents with a sick child? I mean, you talked a little bit about it's agonizing hours of waiting because we all know what it's like to go to a hospital. But what do they have to go through?
Well, it's the not knowing what's going on. They're not very good about keeping you informed. And, a lot of times it's because they don't know yet. And a lot of those procedures and tests take a lot of time. And I'm hoping that they've, maybe streamlined them so they're not as grueling as they were back then. And they actually have come up with anti-nausea medication now, which I think is fabulous. But the biggest problem with the healthcare professionals that I see and that I've heard about from other parents, because I do grief workshops, and from my own experience, is that because doctors are taught to sort of put up a wall between themselves to protect themselves and their patients, that sometimes, that wall, it can be very cold and, like a stone wall. And
sure.
The example that I like to give is when we were trying to figure out what was happening with Cory and whether or not we could do a bone marrow transplant, which was way back in the day when they first started doing these. They typed us for it, and they had the results, but we had to wait another week and a half to get the results. And I had called the research center here in Seattle just to see where it was in process, just because I was curious and impatient. And they were going to give me the results. And I thought, oh, they already have them. Well, I called, and they wouldn't make an appointment for us to come in for another week. And so they'd had them for a couple of days. So by the time no, they didn't have one.
No reason.
So then when I got there, I kept asking the doctor, okay, so if this doesn't work, with this relapse, where is his prognosis? And she wouldn't give me a straight answer. She kept trying to evade the question, and finally I put myself in front of the door and said, you're not leaving until I get an answer. Well, I found out later that I scared her. That wasn't my intention, but why would anybody have to go through such lengths to get a straight answer?
Yeah.
And, I don't think that's right. It's my child. I need to know what I'm up against, and I need to be able to have time to process the information without him there so that in case I want to break down, I don't want to freak him out kind of thing. And so that's the kind of thing that we went up against over and over and over.
And also that they didn't take him as a person.
No.
As a kid, we're not going to talk to him. We're just going to talk to you. And he was a person. It was his body. And I mean, there was a time where there was a doctor and a nurse talking about him, and he and I were both right there. And finally he said, why don't you just ask me instead of, because they were flipping through this 4-inch thick medical file. He said, I know how I'm feeling. Why don't you just ask me? And the guy looked at him and then kept going. And Cory said, you're not touching me. He said, if you're not going to treat me with respect, you are not touching me. And the guy was just dumbfounded that this child, and then he looked at me like, you're allowing your kid to be disrespectful to me? I'm God. And so we did a lot of teaching at that hospital. I'm still very notorious as that mom. Well, that's great. I interviewed a doctor last week. She did the same thing. She was a nurse who became a doctor just so that she could knock them down a little bit off their godlike peg, which I thought was great. On your website, you got some statistics like 12,600 average new diagnosis annually for children, and that 1/4 will not survive. Wow, that's just incredible. And we all have our theories, but I interviewed this guy a number of years ago, and he did a video called Not Run for the Cure, but Run from the Cure, because he really does believe that cancer has a cure, and that we're just not. I mean, all the time and money spent on it. I believe that too. But he was curing a lot of people, and he was curing them with the oil that you get when you break down marijuana. Mm-hmm. And just a dab in the mouth was curing all these people, and he got arrested. He didn't sell it. He didn't sell the cure. He just told people how to make it. And it's kind of interesting that because it's natural and the drug companies, they couldn't get money for it, that there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money in war and a lot of money in cancer and a lot of money in drugs. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I think that there's a lot of money in the common cold too, and there's no cure for that either, is there? There's a lot of drug companies and a lot of people in between making a lot of money. And I hate to sound really jaded, but I was behind a curtain once, and I heard the doctors talking about a little boy who had passed away. And one doctor said to the other that they were going to put on his death certificate that he had died from pneumonia, because they were trying to manipulate the numbers for the cure so that they could get grants. So they wanted it to be bad enough to get grants, but they didn't want it to be so impossible for people to think it was so impossible to look for a cure that they wouldn't give money. And I'm sitting there going, that child died from cancer, so why are you even, I don't get it. But
In South Africa, they put down tuberculosis instead of AIDS. So, it happens everywhere. It happens everywhere, Shirley. It's unbelievable. But I definitely think that, with all the money and all the runs and everything that goes into cancer, we're not stupid. I'm sure there's a cure. Let's go. We got a couple minutes, 6 minutes, actually. Give us the end of the story, why you waited so long.
Do you want the butterfly necklace, or do you want...
I want the butterfly, and then tell us the end. Yep.
Okay. The butterfly, about a couple weeks after Cory was gone, I was in the alpha state of sleep, and I heard him calling me. And I was so excited, and then I accidentally woke myself up by my conscious brain went, wait, he's dead. He can't be talking to you. And I woke up, and I was so angry at myself because I thought he was calling me for a reason. So for the next 3 days, I sort of beat myself up and thought, okay, when he comes back, I'm going to just stay under and ask him what he wants and try to find out what's going on here. So it happened, and he kept calling me, and I said, what do you need, honey? And he said, Mom, what are you going to do with my money? And I said, what money? I'd forgotten that he had a little bit of money in a savings account. And he said, my money. And I said, oh, what do you want me to do with it? And he said, I want you to go see Gordon. Well, my friend Gordon is a diamond wholesaler. And I said, honey, I don't know how much money you think you got in that bank account, but it's not enough to go see Gordon. And he said, Mom, just go. He says, when you see it, you'll know. He says, you'll think of Elizabeth and me. And I went, okay. I said, well, where's your bank book? Well, then he was gone. So I woke up and I thought, okay, that was a little crazy. So I got dressed. I went up to his room. I searched his room from one end to the other, and I could never find the stupid bank book. So I kind of blew it off for a couple days, and I thought, okay, that's weird. Well, then I started having a toothache that drove me crazy. And I had been off work for almost 6 weeks when he was dying and right after he died. And so I didn't want to miss work because I worked for a guy that wasn't very pleasant about that. And finally my assistant said, well, I'm going to call your dentist and see if he'll go in early so that you can be seen before you come to work. So I said, okay. Well, I went in, and he looked at my mouth, and he said, it's fine. And I said, no, it's been abscessing. And I said, it hurts. And he said, Shirley, it's fine. And I said, no, I am not crazy. I want to go see somebody. So he sent me downtown to an oral surgeon who looked in my mouth. He, probed every tooth, tapped on it with a little hammer, and he looked at me, and he said, there's nothing wrong with any of the teeth in your mouth. And I said, there is. And he said, nope. So it turns out that they sent me to the same building where my friend, the diamond wholesaler, it was across the street from his office, but it's where he was part owner in a private showroom. So I thought, well, I'll stop in there and see his brother and ask if he's even in town so I don't have to go across the street. So I went in, and I was talking to them, and they said that Gordon was on a sales trip in Southern Oregon. And I said, oh, well, that's weird. So I'm standing there talking, and I look in the jewelry case, and there's this beautiful butterfly necklace, and the head is a diamond. And it was hanging over a little piece of petrified wood, and I said, how much is this? And they said, oh, well, let's see. So they weighed it and measured the diamond and everything, and all of a sudden I felt like I was in a foggy room, and I heard Cory's voice say, see, I told you you'd think of Elizabeth and me, because Elizabeth's logo is a hand releasing a butterfly. So they told me that they would give me.
Too.
Oh, I love it. I still wear it every day.
Yeah.
And so it turns out that the exact amount of money that they've charged me for this necklace, which was half of what it was worth, was how much he had in his bank account to the penny.
Isn't that amazing?
It was just amazing. And then I took it home that night, and I was sitting on the edge of my bed feeling guilty about it because I had borrowed money from my parents to bury my son, because I was off work for so long. And I was sitting there going, oh, what have I done? And he elbowed me, and I looked over, and he was sitting next to me looking like 7, and he said, just put the damn thing on. It wasn't your money to begin with.
Okay, tell the ending of the story. We got 2 minutes. We got 2 minutes.
Well, so I don't want to give it away too much, but the ending is that my grandson has had many, many things to talk about that he shouldn't know, much like my son. But
grandson Cory, by the
way.
So
starting from the time he was 2, almost 3, he has said, I am Uncle Cory, that's me.
Yeah.
So, and that went all the way up until he was 8. He talked about it until he was 8 years old. Yeah.
And then that was it.
So I asked him last summer, do you remember what you used to tell us? And he said, not everything. He says, but I know who I am. And I went, okay.
And when was the last time you saw Cory, your son Cory?
I haven't seen him, but I talked to him when I was in Lilydale last summer.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. And he's still doing okay.
Yep, he's always around me. And then he explained to me when I was in Lilydale how he could be in my grandson in Hawaii and talking to me in Lilydale at the same time.
Oh, really? That's
yeah.
fascinating. I need to know
he
about
said that is like a spray. Well, if you spray an aerosol can and the spray goes all over the place, it's all still part of the whole. It's all still part of where it came from, and that's how. And it made sense.
Oh, that does make sense.
Yeah. So I was very relieved, and that was really sort of the backstory of one of the reasons I wanted to go to Lilydale was to find that out.
Yeah, Lilydale is a very special place.
It's amazing.
Shirley Enebrad, thank you so much for sharing your story, your son's story with us this evening. It was so wonderful to talk to you and hear about that face is just so adorable. I mean, I just cry looking at his face just because it's so cute. It reminds me of my son. Shirley's website, again, is overtherainbowbridge.info. And make sure you read this book. There's a lot of life lessons, more than we've talked about in this book, and I'm sure that anybody who reads it is going to be better for it. Thank you so much for writing it.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. I will see you next week for another Mission Unstoppable. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Frankie.
Goodbye,
Bye.
Shirley.